In this session, we will talk about reading research papers and also about the structure of a research paper. Research aims to add the world's body of knowledge, so it means that it requires a researcher to be aware of what's the current body of knowledge of that time in the area she works in. So without knowing the state of the art or current trends in the body of knowledge, it's impossible to make contribution. Like, it means that doing research while blinded or something like this. So you need to have a grip on the world's body of knowledge in the area you're studying. Frontiers of the world's body of knowledge are not documented in textbooks. I mean, you cannot find them. Suppose that you're trying to make research about computer networks, for example. You cannot find anything interesting in Andrew Tannenbaum's books, for example, although they are very good books. And suppose that you're trying to do research in artificial intelligence, for example. Again, you cannot find anything interesting. In the notion that could be new or frontier in Russell Norwich's book, for example, Artificial Intelligence. Although they're, ultimately good books, but you cannot rely on those books for the world's current body of knowledge or trends. In those textbooks, usually well-documented, well-verified, well-known facts are given, or foundations, theoretical basics are given, not the trends, actually. You can find them in journal articles, conference papers, here, like workshop papers and technical reports. These are, as you go below, these are more timely. Like, you can find very, very new stuff here in technical reports, workshop, conference papers, and finally journal articles, because it takes a few months, sometimes a few years, to get published for journal articles. But there's a trade-off, because they are truly evaluated. It means that they would be more reliable, you see. Journal articles are the most reliable of these body of knowledge or research papers, and the other ones are, although they're very useful, but not as reliable as the journal articles. But you should keep in mind that there are very, very top quality conferences and workshops in particularly computer engineering domain as well. Even comparable, even better than some journals, more prestigious, by means of prestige, with very low acceptance rates, like 5% or 10%. So they are also reliable, it means that. Getting organized is very important for research as well, because you need to maintain a database of all the books and papers you read, so that you can refer them later. The data stored should at least include the title, author, place of publication, and storage location. Why do we need this? Because we want to reach them later easily. And preferably, but this is not enough, this is the basics, this is the most basic thing. Preferably, and I strongly suggest that you should also keep a record of the answers to some or all of the following questions. If possible, all of the questions. Yes, with each paper you read, if they're interesting for your area, there is a possibility that you will use them later. Answer these following questions. Mark my word, it will be very helpful while you're writing your thesis report, or if you're trying to get your work published, you can use them in your paper as well. What are those main questions? Take a note of all of them, like maybe 1 or 2 pages for each of the paper, like a short summary. What is the main topic of the article? What was the main issue the authors want to discuss so that you can remember them later quickly? Why did the author claim it was important? How does the work build on others' work in the author's opinion? What are the simplifying assumptions the author claim? What did the author do? How did the authors claim they were going to evaluate their work and compare it to others? What about the comparison? And what did the author say were the limitations of their research? And what did the author say were the important directions for future research as well? These are also very important, so it can help you to draw a direction for your research as well. So these parts are very important for new research areas as well. So get them organized in a few pages for each paper so that you will have a real good time later while you're writing your thesis. Else you need to go, if you have a simple database like this, it means that you will forget what you have read, most probably in a few months or later, and you need to reread them again and again. But if you have a detailed summary of each paper like this, maybe you will not, most probably, need to read the same papers all over and over again. You can just refer to your summaries about those papers. Evaluating research per papers is very important because it's very interesting. Whenever you read a research paper, you should try to evaluate it at the same time. So it means that reading means also evaluating. Why? You should at least evaluate whether it could be useful for you or not. Is it good enough that you can put a reference on it? You should be evaluating it as well. If you think that it is not very good, it means that you cannot rely on the claims on that paper. So that's why you need to evaluate at the same time as well. Try to answer the following questions. Is the topic of the paper sufficiently interesting for you personally or in general? Did the author miss important earlier work? What about its literature research? And are the evaluation methods adequate? Yes. And are the theorems and proofs are correct? Yes. And arguments are convincing? Are the arguments of the paper convincing? And does the author mention directions for future research that interest you? This is also important. I mean, you can put this or summarize this in a way too, but up to you. Given the answers to these questions for a number of research papers, you should be able to construct a research proposal. This is very important. We talked about this by considering how you could improve the work presented in them. That's what you're trying to do. That would be your contribution. That's why it's important. And what about the structure of a research paper? How should it be? Now, this is what we emphasize, what we want to overview. I'm sure most of you already have an idea, but let's take a look at all of them one by one. Here, you can go ahead, title, list of authors, abstract, introduction, related work, outline, body of papers, summary and future acknowledgements, list of references. Okay, this is most likely the backbone or structure of a research paper. However, this can take place here as well. Okay, right after the body of paper as well. Other than this, most probably this is the order. This is my belief that it should be very rare that you can have a different order, but this should be the order as I see from my experience. Okay, the title should be as short as possible, but without abbreviations or acronyms. We want them to be short and also to be as understandable as possible. You can use abbreviations or acronyms only if they are commonly understood. I mean, if they are very, very, I mean, for example, AI maybe, AI. Okay, if they are very understood, you can. Otherwise, I mean, maybe you should avoid. You should be as specific as necessary and as general as possible. Here, you need to have a trade-off and keep the balance here. It should be as specific as necessary and as general as possible at the same time. You're on the thin line. For example, the complexity of theorem proving procedures which introduced the notion of NP completeness, starting point of complexity theory. So maybe it's good. Include key phrases which are likely to be used in a search on the topic of the paper. For example, modal logic, calculus, decision procedure, so that if someone makes a search in that particular word sets, he can or she can reach your paper. You should avoid phrases which are too very common, like novel, a novel method for doing some things, blah blah. No need to say that. Use phrases. Instead, be specific as necessary. Use phrases that describe the distinctive features of the work. It means that, again, you're trying to outline what's your difference, the real world reasoning with O, for example. Okay. And about the authors. An author of a paper is an individual, be careful, who made a significant intellectual contribution to the work described in the paper. Look, we're talking about intellectual contribution, not monetary contribution, for example, okay? You get funding, but it cannot be the author who opened their laboratory for you, or who provided maybe a device for you, an expensive device for you. They cannot be authors. They could be mentioned in the acknowledgement part. We will see. And the people who made a contribution to drafting, reviewing, or revising the paper for its intellectual contribution. These people also can be authors. Very nice. However, these people cannot be authors. The people who spell checked, who typesetted, or, for example, you write your paper in Turkish and someone get it translated to English. I mean, they are not authors. They're just doing some. Yes, you can mention about them in the acknowledgements part, but not as authors. And the people or the researchers who approved the final version of the paper, including the references, the total one should be approved by all of the authors. I mean, the total paper. Full paper. The order of authors may depend on the subject area. In pure theory research, usually alphabetical is common. And applied research, it's the author order is based on contribution. Research assessment is important. For example, bibliographic measures associating order with contribution. We're mostly doing applied research here, and if you're first author, you get some points. If you're second author, you get less points, blah, blah, and so on. For example, these are the criteria, academic criteria in Turkey, for example. And also cultural context is important. Maybe in some different institutions or different different cultures, the ordering can be different as well. But this is, I think, the case for our situation here in Turkey or in computer engineering particularly. There is also a concept of hyper-authorship. There are very, very interesting papers with numerous authors in it. For example, maybe in physics and natural sciences, you see some papers like this. Some papers having more than 5,000 authors. It's again interesting because it's the only the 9 pages of 33-page article is in fact the paper itself. The other ones are the remaining 24 pages are the list of the authors and institutions. It's possible because they're doing research with huge groups at CERN. This is the concept of hyper-authorship. And And in computer science, the academic degrees and membership of professional organizations are typically not indicated. You just write their names. You do not type like, okay, your professor, doctor, someone or something like this. You don't put the academic degrees here or your memberships here, just the names. List of authors is typically followed by contact information consisting of the affiliation, where he is affiliated at that moment of research, and the email address of the author. Some journals allow authors to provide longer descriptions of themselves, like short CVs, brief, in a few paragraphs maybe, including photographs as well, and as including their areas of research and maybe some of the places they worked in projects. Some journals allow it. I think IEEE journals have that kind of information at the end of the papers about the authors, as far as I remember. And let's talk about the abstract. Abstract typically should not be more than 100 and 150 words, like it should be in that range. It should aim to motivate the people to read the paper. Okay, so it should be as interesting as possible so that they will read your paper, and if someone reads your paper, they can cite them. So it would be nice for you. And it should highlight the problem and the principal results of the paper. And the abstract will be included in the literature databases as well. This is important because your full paper should be might require some payment or might require some access to be downloaded. But usually the abstracts are free for all. Everyone can read the abstracts, so it would be everywhere. Make sure that key phrases which might be used in searches are included in your abstract. It is the same principle like the titles. So be as directive as possible on this part. And keep references to any minimum, preferably 0. Okay, no references in abstract is the best, but keep them to a minimum. And keep equations and other mathematical expressions to a minimum. Again, preferably 0 is much better, but you should try to keep them as minimum as possible. Then comes the introduction part. Here in this part, you should state the general area of research, unless this is too obvious from the context in which the paper appears, but usually you need to state this. You should introduce the problem, state why the problem is important and interesting, and outline the approach taken to solve the problem. Talk about your method here, body of paper, and outline the solution or principal results of the study, and state why the results are important and interesting as well, because people read this introduction for detail later. And be careful, do not repeat the abstract. So be different from the abstract and avoid platitudes and cliches as possible. Like nowadays the technology or artificial intelligence is everywhere, whatever. I mean, just avoid some cliche sayings or sentences as best as you can. And the related work part. Related work is very important, and it is previous work by the same or other authors which address the same or closely related problems and topics. This section on related work gives credit to such work and establishes the originality of the current work. Depending on your grasp of recent trends in your domain and your grip on the domain, you can underline the originality, or you can defend the originality of your work much easier in the other parts of the paper. Extent depends on the space available. Okay, you don't have lots of space here. Most probably, for most papers, you will have a page limit, so you can't be too generous here. And the relevance of the related work to the work presented in the paper, like how much of them you need to use for in relation to your work. Within these constraints, make sure all related work is cited and correctly described, okay? They can be short, but be careful that all related work is cited and mentioned in the related work part. Because failure to give credit can result in a bad evaluation and kill your paper. Why? Because the people who will judge your paper or who will comment on your paper will be experts in the domain and will be most probably aware of the other researchers' studies in the domain, and they will be expecting to see those papers in related work as well. I mean, if they're missing, it means that your paper can easily be rejected. The section on related work is either part of the introduction or following the introduction. It's classical, this one, following the introduction, or it is placed at the end of the body of the paper. It is also very common in applied research to put the related work at the end of the body of paper as well. The outline of the paper typically is given at the end of the introduction, within the introduction, just at the end of the introduction. It describes the content of the body of the paper, section by section, like advertisement, like promotion. For example, the remainder of the paper is organized as follows. In section 2, we talk about this. In section 3, describes this. Finally, we describe future work in section 5. Okay, section 5. So we're just promoting our paper so that it would motivate the reader to read it truly. The body of the paper is, of course, what you have done. It's the core. Depends strongly on subject area and topic of the paper. Typical structure of a computer science paper on theoretical research, for example, has these parts in it: basic definitions, description of a new algorithm or calculus or formalism, sequence of theorems accompanied by proofs or sketches, or proof sketches, and applications, consequences of the results. This can either take place or not. It's optional. What we have here in computer engineering is usually in applied research, like this is the typical structure here. It's just starts with the architecture of a new system, description of the realization, and evaluation, for example. The same can be done for comparative studies as well. The combinations of the two are possible and quite typical. Papers on action research, case studies, surveys, experiments are also common and have their own structure. Each of them has different classical structures, typical structures. It's normal. You can have an idea of them as you make your literature reviews. As you read lots of papers, you will get familiar with the structure of the paper, body of the papers as well. And the conclusion and future work part. The people usually read introduction, abstract conclusion very much are the parts, and these parts should be interesting as possible for your good. It summarizes the contributions of the paper. Okay, this is very important. You should address your contribution, and it describes the implications and applications of the contributions made by the paper. Yes, this should be underlined, your contribution, and outlines for future directions of research as well. Okay, what can be done more? It is also interesting to direct research or to put some trends for future, set some trends. After the conclusion usually comes the acknowledgements parts. Of course, this is optional. Okay, maybe some optional. Okay, you may not have acknowledgements, but we usually have. Acknowledgements are external funding resources can be mentioned here. The thanks to non-authors that made significant contribution, the people who typeset your work. May help you with the English, for example, whatever language checking. Colleagues or fellow researchers with which the authors had discussions related to the topic of the paper when you're having a brainstorming or coffee break. Even some ideas can be interesting. You can mention about them here, your colleagues. And anonymous referees even can give very valuable feedbacks to your paper, provided they have given exceptional level of feedback or important insights to your paper can be mentioned here. Why not? Okay, these are the hints for a research paper. When you're writing, you need to be careful about this, and when you're evaluating, you should make sure that the authors satisfy these. So these hints are valid for both of the sides of the coin. Okay, top-down design starts with an outline, then fill in the details. This is possible. There are two types of design. And inside-out writing, this is for you when you're writing a paper. Fill in the body of the paper first, then write the introduction, related work, conclusion, finally write the abstract. This is called inside-out writing. Whatever suits you, okay? I think, if I think about myself, I usually go for, I think, top-down design. Yeah. I remember, I just think about my past experiences, and I realized that I mostly do top-down design, but up to you, whatever suits you. Okay, the diagrams and tables should be readable. It's very important. Can they be understood well? There should be no mistakes in them, and their numbers should be correct. Be careful. And dependency analysis, is the paper self-contained and are notions presented in the correct order? It's again important for to be interesting. And factuality, make sure everything stated in the paper is factually correct, okay? There should be no question about that. And interpretability is very important. For each sentence, check whether it could be misread. If so, try to fix it, especially when you're writing paper in a language other than your native language. There could be many misinterpretations. It's normal. I can also suggest you to make a foreigner. For example, if I'm writing in English, I may kindly ask a native English speaker of my friends to read the paper, just have an idea. Are there any problems here? Or maybe you can get it checked by any English teacher, for example, in okay, she could be Turkish, but an English teacher can help you to avoid the misinterpretations. It's very important because we make mistakes a lot. It's normal, since it's not our own native language. And optimization is important. We should remove unnecessary parts and shorten exposition. Yes, because time is very important, right? The people who read your paper, their time is also important. Your time is also important. I mean, if you can explain a 10-page paper in eight pages, why not go for the smaller one, shorten exposition? It's better for all parties, for myself too, for the writer too. And the readability. Does it read well? Are all parts interconnected? This is very important. It should be as readable as possible. Everything flows in an order so that it could be interesting. It could be worth reading. There are some academic writing tools and software help you to read create some research papers. Okay, Microsoft tools, LaTeX, OpenOffice, LibreOffice, Scrivener, Google Docs, Dropbox Paper, and so on. Many types of writing tools available on the internet. You can check them. I just named a few of them. And we need this a lot because we use English as a second language here, foreign language here. We need to have some grammar checkers and sentence correction tools as well. But even if you have some good tools, I strongly suggest you make a native speaker read your paper for a while so that he can make a better correction than those grammar checker software, I think. Again, you can use words, spelling and grammar checker. I sometimes use it. Grammarly, ProWriting It, Correct English, StyleWriter, White Smoke, Ginger Software, and there are lots of online grammar checking sites. Even Google Translate is doing great work on this. I mean, it can help you to give you an idea about some common mistakes we encounter while writing the papers. Okay, we talked about the reading research papers and so how should the structure of a research paper be, and we also talked about some academic writing tools and grammar checking tools. I took them from this site. If you're interested, you can see them in detail in that website as well.